We must be bold and lead with this first-in-the-nation legislation to combat insider threats.
Colorado Democrats are pushing for tighter election security when it comes to election officials.
Over the past few years, we have seen just how fragile our democratic institutions can be.
Plus, Russia is escalating attacks in Ukraine.
The world is haunted by these images of homes, hospitals, schools, orphanages being destroyed, demolished in front of our eyes.
Airstrikes hit Kyiv. As world leaders travel to the Ukrainian capital to meet with Ukraine's president. And be prepared for construction along the 16th Street Mall, the changes you'll start to see in just a few weeks. Russia is expanding its attacks in Ukraine's capital. Photos and videos now show the moments after an airstrike hit a residential area, setting the building on fire and leaving it badly damaged. And the city will be now under a curfew until Thursday as attacks intensify. Thanks so much for joining us for Denver 7 News at 11. I'm Jason Grenauer. While Russia increases those attacks, the country is pushing back on sanctions from the U.S. and other countries. The Kremlin is imposing its own sanctions against President Joe Biden and other U.S. officials. Elizabeth Schulze is following the latest developments from Washington.
20 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, Russian forces are escalating their attacks on the capital, Kyiv. 3 areas were hit overnight, including this 15-story apartment block. This missile strike in the heart of the city, killing at least 2 people and wounding several others. ABC's Ian Pannell is on the ground in Kyiv.
This is exactly what indiscriminate Russian bombardment actually looks like. An apartment block struck by a missile at 5 in the morning, and you can see the incredible damage that it's done. And scenes like this are being played out across the country.
Drone footage shows the devastation in the battered city of Mariupol. In a show of solidarity with Ukraine, leaders from 3 EU countries today are visiting Kyiv to meet with President Zelensky. After a Russian strike on a Ukrainian military base just 10 miles from the Polish border, global leaders increasingly fear the war could widen beyond Ukraine's borders.
So an attack on one ally will trigger the response of the whole alliance, and we are there to protect and defend every inch of NATO allied territory.
The UN says nearly 3 million refugees have now fled Ukraine. Half of them children. That's nearly 1 child becoming a refugee every second since the war began. 9 evacuation corridors reopening today. And after a pause Monday, peace talks between Ukrainian and Russian officials are again underway.
It's to Russia's advantage to continue to try and negotiate, to show that they're a willing participation in the negotiations themselves, but it also buys them time on the battlefield.
Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
Just within the last 10 minutes, NATO now confirms world leaders will meet in Brussels next week. An EU official says President Joe Biden will attend, but the White House has not confirmed that. The war in Ukraine is keeping gas prices in the U.S. high, but they have remained steady over the past few days. Prices in Colorado are still below $4 a gallon at $3.97. The U.S. average is about $4.32 a gallon. And prices of just about everything else are also rising. The government says wholesale inflation shot up 10% last month from a year earlier, and the producer price index, which tracks inflation before it hits customers, rose 0.8% from January. It's a sign inflation pressures remain intense at really all levels of the economy. The government report does not include prices that change after February 15th, so it does not include that spike in energy prices when Russia invaded Ukraine. A Republican-backed bill related to elections and voting has stalled in the State House committee. It includes things like eliminating some mail-in voting and requiring in-person voting on Election Day. Now, on the other side of the aisle, Colorado Democrats are working on legislation regarding election officials and election security ahead of the midterm elections in November. Denver 7's Christian Lopez takes a closer look at that bill, getting its first committee test today.
Colorado Democrats just unveiled this new bill yesterday, and let me break down exactly what it does. Senate Bill 153, otherwise known as the Colorado Election Security Act, does a few main things. First, it will increase security measures by requiring key card access to voting equipment rooms and year-round surveillance. Second, it will require more training and certifications for elected officials. And third, it tightens rules around the election officials themselves, saying they cannot serve if they've been convicted of an election crime, and they can't spread misinformation about elections.
I don't think it's much to too much to ask to say if you're running our elections, you can't lie about our elections.
And Senate Republicans told us they'll be tracking the bill's progression, and they're hoping for a bipartisan collaboration when it's considered. Reporting in Denver, I'm Christian Lopez, Denver 7.
That measure is a reaction to Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. Peters will be arraigned in May. She's accused of tampering with election equipment. Peters and Mesa County's deputy clerk were indicted on multiple felony charges following a long-running investigation into how sensitive election information ended up online. Now, Peters is also separately accused of trying to kick a police officer who was detaining her in another separate case. Happening right now, Mayor Michael Hancock is in Washington, D.C. today talking about protecting voting rights. He's attending the National League of Cities conference. The mayor is also expected to talk about public safety and solutions to violence and violent crime. Governor Jared Polis is taking the next steps to introduce universal preschool in Colorado. He's meeting with lawmakers, educators, and parents right now about that program. Now, a bill was introduced on Friday that creates a Department of Early Childhood and sets the priorities that the department would have. The legislation has its first committee hearing on Thursday. State leaders want to see universal preschool implemented by next year. We'll have much more on this story tonight on Denver 7 News at 5. Aurora is advancing a proposed homeless camping ban after adding an amendment about temporary storing things or items that come after a sweep. Now, the measure passed with Mayor Mike Kaufman breaking a tie. It requires a 72-hour notice before a camp on public property is cleared. The city would have to provide people in that encampment an alternative place to stay. A final vote is expected in 2 weeks. Well, things across Colorado and the U.S. are finally returning to normal 2 years after the pandemic. More places and events are dropping COVID safety precautions. As Denver 7's Veronica Acosta reports, we're also starting to see how Colorado's economy is rebounding.
Colorado has gained back almost all the jobs it lost when that pandemic hit. State economists say we lost most of those during the first 2 months of it. They say this is a really fast rebound and expect the next jobs report, which actually comes out in about 10 days, to show we've recovered 100% of the losses. One thing, though, that's not back to those pre-pandemic levels, unemployment. Then the other challenge that we've seen and heard about so much, supply chain issues. Bandit Oak Brewing, a small brewery in Denver, is feeling that pinch. Those supply chain issues forcing them to boost the price of their beer.
We're small, we don't distribute, so it's very transparent what we are able to create at what cost. And then we do have to pass some of that on. And it's been happening for a while before we had to increase costs on the menu. So just kind of got to a point where it's like, okay, this is going to affect the way we run it.
At Bandit Oak, they've actually had to increase prices of their drinks about 50 cents or so. As for the economy, those state economists say they expect unemployment to reach 3% sometime this year. In Denver, I'm Veronica Acosta, Denver 7.
The 16th Street Mall is about to get a major facelift. Phase 1 of the project starts next month from Market to Broadway. It includes opening walkways next to stores and other buildings. Other renovations include a new granite paver system and moving transit lanes. Utilities will be upgraded and tree canopies will be expanded. You can give your input during a virtual open house from 5:30 to 7 tonight. That restoration project is just one of the ways Denver is trying to bring people back to the mall. The city and the Downtown Denver Partnership are going through applications right now to bring in 5 new pop-up businesses. The city hopes to have them open on the mall by June 1st. Drivers, be prepared for a major traffic switch tonight. You're looking live at the Steel Street ramp at I-70 where that switch is happening. Now, right now, eastbound traffic uses the middle lanes. That's the part shaded in red on this map. But starting tonight, eastbound traffic will switch to those lanes shaded in blue.
The first minor shift into the new lanes of I-70 with the major shift between Brighton Boulevard and Steel Street taking place this summer, and that'll switch traffic into its permanent alignment.
A second tunnel dividing east and westbound traffic is set to open this summer, and work is expected to start on the park that goes on top of those tunnels in just a few weeks. You know, it took them a day, but the Broncos have made their splash in free agency. Our Broncos insider Troy Rank is reporting the team will be signing defensive end Randy Gregory. 29-year-old Gregory, who previously played in Dallas, had reportedly agreed to a deal with the Cowboys, but then that deal fell apart. Troy is reporting the deal with the Broncos will be for 5 years, worth $70 million. Gregory has had some off-the-field issues in the past, but is a young pass rusher that fills a needed hole on the defensive side of the ball. Well, spring training games for the Rockies start tomorrow. The Rockies start with a 2-game series against the Diamondbacks. Opening day is about 3.5 weeks away on Friday, April 8th against the Dodgers. The CU men's basketball team starts the postseason tonight in the first round of the NIT. They are the number 4 seed and host the 5 seed St. Bonaventure Bonnies. Tip-off from Boulder is at 9. The winner plays the winner of the Oklahoma-Missouri State game. Still ahead, a special church service is making a comeback in person 2 years after the pandemic started. Plus, a mother of 7 is getting a second chance at life. She's tackling a long journey, taking her to new heights.